Hey everyone, Gill Gross here post-match. Lorenzo Musetti versus Taylor Fritz, Wimbledon 2024 quarterfinal. If you're not here for spoilers, click off the video. Lorenzo Musetti is through to his first ever major semifinal with a 5-set win over Taylor Fritz. Happy for Musetti, big time result for him, crushing result for Taylor. He comes in as the favorite. Why? Well, because he's been a better player than Lorenzo Musetti, generally speaking, for the last 4 years of their respective careers. Consistently, he's been the better player. He's been to 3 major quarterfinals before. He had come up against the likes of Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic. This was his chance. As the higher seed, as the more established player, to make his first major semifinal. And he did not come through. And as a result of these things, I think the narratives are going to be difficult on Fritz. I think that they are going to sound something like Fritz crumbled, Fritz shrunk, Fritz melted. He played a terrible match. He blew it. I could be wrong, but I think there's going to be a lot of that out there. I think there's a speckle of truth to that because I don't think Taylor played his best. That said, that's very different from my reality. My reality of this match is very different from Fritz should have had this in the bag and he clearly just blew it. I don't see it that way. I see the things that Lorenzo Musetti is able to do on a tennis court, his unique set of skills, and I see those unique set of skills matched up against Taylor Fritz and his strengths and weaknesses as a player, and I see a problem for Fritz. I see a matchup where Musetti is able to do things on this surface that even if Fritz is at his very best, even if he's performing at his peak level, Fritz is always going to struggle to deal with some of the things that Musetti asks you to deal with. The other aspect of this is that this was always going to be a difficult spot for Fritz mentally. All of the pressure was on him. Now, Musetti was a little bit overwhelmed at times as well in this match. It was I thought we were going to see more nerves from Musetti in the 5th set. To be completely honest, we did not. Kind of running away with it and getting off to the start that he did is a big help. But ultimately, I just also want to make the point that sometimes tennis can be a really cruel game mentally, where the more a player wants it, the more a player needs it, the more a player expects it, which is the position that Fritz was in, the harder it is to actually perform. Let's get to the tactics. Lorenzo Musetti's slice broke down Taylor Fritz in all facets of the game. It left Taylor confounded. And when I say all facets of the game, I'm talking about defense, I'm talking about neutral, I'm talking about offense. So I'll go category by category, but also keep in mind, I just want to get this out of the way, that the reason a grass court rewards slice, or a reason a slice is more effective on grass court, is twofold. One, the court has less friction. It's slick. It's slippery. So a slice tends to skid, where on a court that offers up the maximum amount of friction, like a gritty hard court or a clay court, instead of the ball skidding through the court and maintaining its speed, it actually checks. It slows down a ton because it really takes to the slice. The other aspect of it is how low bouncing it is, and that has to do with the hardness of the surface. A surface that is very, very hard is going to be higher bouncing. Grass is a softer surface, which means it is lower bouncing. Let's start with when Fritz is attacking and Musetti is defending. And that includes the serve-return dynamic. When Fritz is bombing his first serve and Musetti, yeah, it might be a little bit different from a regular slice, but he is blocking the ball with backspin and taking pace off, and sometimes trying to keep it short and low. So while, yes, the technique is a little bit different from a slice, they are sisters, brothers and sisters. They are related to each other, right? Siblings, I think was the word I was going for. They're siblings. The block return and the slice defense. So let's talk about that. Why is that effective? The first thing is that it goes in the court more. So Musetti is very fast and very skilled. He covers the court great. So he makes you play extra balls. Not only does he get to use his court coverage and his speed, but when he's playing slice defense and when he's blocking returns, it's an easier shot to control. So he's putting the ball in the court. That's number one. But why is it effective? Because putting the ball on the court alone isn't enough. It's effective because the slower speed of the shot makes Fritz generate all of his own pace and gives time for Musetti to achieve his optimal court position before Fritz hits the next shot. Whether that be recovering in the middle, maybe moving back a little bit to retreat. It gives Musetti time. It buys him time to recover. The ball also stays outside of the optimal attacking height. A good block return, a good slice defense stays below the level of the hip. That forces a Taylor Fritz to hit up on the ball, get the ball up and down, hit from below the level of the net. If the ball is in the optimal striking height between the hip and the shoulder, and Taylor has plenty of time to attack, he's going to get a nice straight, flat trajectory. He's going to be able to hit through the court and penetrate with a lot more venom. So we've got height, we've got pace, we've got positioning. Then the other thing, I mentioned that it helps Musetti's positioning, but sometimes when Musetti hits the short block return or the short defensive slice, he drags Taylor Fritz inside the baseline, which is going to do a couple things. One, the contact point is now closer to the opposite baseline if you're Fritz. So now you have to be even more delicate, because if you hit the ball, you have less distance to work with. You're at more risk of hitting long because you're closer to the opposite baseline. So you have to be more delicate with your shot. That takes away your power potential and your ability to attack. It also puts you in an awkward position sometimes. Now, if you're comfortable going forward, not so awkward. You can just take it as an approach shot. If you're not comfortable going forward and you're trying to move backwards after you hit the ball, well, now you're in a vulnerable position, which we'll talk about more. But Fritz, 65% first serve win percentage. That is abysmal for him on grass. I was looking at his career numbers. There's some missing data points. I didn't see Eastbourne submitted into the Tennis Abstract database, and Wimbledon matches so far are not in the Tennis Abstract database. But I can pretty much assure you that it was the second lowest first serve win percentage for Fritz on grass of his career at 65%. He's only been worse on grass once. Then you have slicing the ball from neutral in neutral situations. So Musetti using his slice on rally balls as a setup shot. And for the same reason why it's difficult for Fritz to attack a good block return or a good defensive slice, for all of those same reasons that have to do with contact height and contact point and where he ends up on the court, it's difficult for Taylor to hit a high-quality trade and remain unattackable. But the biggest thing is that because Fritz likes to move backwards against any short slice, and he doesn't like to move forwards, he ends up in a position where he can't defend. And I know we talk about, not we, but I guess there's like a positive connotation in tennis with being up on the baseline. Take time away. Take it early. Suffocate your opponent. Hug that baseline. Like, these things they have positive associations. But do you know what's awful? To be right on top of the baseline, or even worse, inside the baseline, when your opponent is about to crush the ball, is about to inject pace, is about to attack you into a corner. Now you have less time to react. You can't cover the court as well. You're rushed when you're trying to defend. So what we saw from Musetti was slice setup, drive attack. Slice trade, drive build. Slice, earn the weak ball, pull Fritz out of position, make Taylor lift up, And now we attack. We usually attack him into the open court. Oftentimes with a forehand inside in. Sometimes with the backhand down the line. Sometimes it wasn't a cross-court backhand slice from Musetti. Sometimes it's backhand slice down the line. Make Fritz lift up on the forehand cross-court. Aggressive forehand down the line for Musetti. All these patterns were working. Earn the weak ball, puts Fritz out of position. Now you have a Taylor who's trying to retreat, doesn't really have time to do it. He's on top of the baseline, out of defensive position, and Musetti gets to try to rip the ball. And Lorenzo is a talented ball striker. It's not just fluff and it's not just variety and finesse. He can hit the crap out of the ball. All right? So that's the neutral aspect of slicing as a setup shot. And then you have the most aggressive version of it, which is when you're slicing so short in the court that Taylor has to come in. Or when you're hitting a drop shot. And I'll say the execution on those kinds of balls from Musetti, the ultra short slice and the drop shot, is just phenomenal. And one thing I really liked from Lorenzo was also using the lob after the to follow up the drop shot with the lob, because on grass it's hard to stop. So you have Taylor running in. You don't have Fritz redropping a lot. So usually it's Fritz runs in, he digs it deep. Musetti usually is in and takes the ball early, doesn't let it bounce before Fritz has a chance to recover really and slow down and decelerate. The ball is popping up over his head. So he's running in. It's really hard to stop. It's really hard to decelerate. And now he's getting lobbed. And that combination was awesome for Musetti. Now I started talking about skill gaps. All of these things that I just described Musetti doing, of course he can try to do it against anybody. But what is it about Taylor Fritz that makes him particularly vulnerable to this? And there might be some more nuanced things when it comes to his footwork and his technique and his preference for a flatter backhand, his mobility when it comes to recovering his position. But the biggest thing, no doubt, is just that Taylor doesn't like to come forward. That's the biggest thing. Because at the end of the day, the best way to handle a short slice is to take it as an approach shot. The best thing to do against slice defense is to net rush against it. Because guess what? For all of the great things that a deep floating slice can do, do you know what it can't do? Do you know what it's terrible at? Passing an oncoming net rusher. It is terrible at that. There is nothing that serves up more easy, juicy volley finish opportunities than a nice floating defensive slice. But you got to come in proactively in order to take advantage of that. Same thing for the block return, particularly if the block returner is deep in the court. We've discussed this throughout the tournament at times. You want to serve and volley against that. Fritz does not serve and volley. When he does, the volley execution is a little bit hit or miss. What Musetti was doing tactically was begging Taylor to come forward. And Fritz did 41 times. But the win rate was only 61%, which for net points, that's low, especially when it's a pretty high number. But I expect Novak in the next match. Now, maybe they won't play 5 sets, and then it'll be less than 41 times. But I'll put it into a rate, and we'll see. I think he's going to be at the net way more than Fritz was. There were, I'll run through the other. Look, the slice was the biggest thing, in my opinion. Main determining factor in the match was how Musetti was able to use the slice offensively and defensively to disrupt Fritz, to set up his attacks, to defend successfully, to draw errors. But there were also, meat and potatoes aspects to Musetti's game that came on after the first set. When I say meat and potatoes, sometimes you just got to hit a really good first serve and you got to hit a good aggressive +1. And that wasn't happening for a while, and that came on a lot more for Musetti after the first set. There is one thing that Taylor Fritz did really well in this match, only one, which is attack Musetti's second serve. I thought he was on top of that. He was hitting really good, deep, hard, penetrating returns, rushing Musetti, hitting big ground strokes behind his aggressive return. That is the one thing that Taylor did super well in this match. Now, there was one second serve that Musetti hit in this match that was maybe one of the most important swings of the racket that he had in the entire match, and that's 6-5 in the second set tiebreak. Fritz had been attacking Musetti's second serve really well up until this point, and Lorenzo knew he was going to have to do something with the ball. He was going to have to hit a good second serve, and to his credit, he accelerated. He hit it deep. He hit it at Fritz's forehand, and he got the service winner off of the second serve with great acceleration and really good fearlessness in this spot. That was at 6-5 in the second set tiebreak, and it's worth going over the tiebreak in a little bit more detail because at the end of the day, if Fritz goes up 2-0, maybe he ends up pulling out the match. Well, the mini break came on one of the combinations that we're talking about with the backhand slice of Musetti. He went backhand slice cross-court. Fritz lifted up on a backhand cross-court trade, and Musetti redirected with the backhand down the line, which he hit for a winner, with Taylor in poor defensive position off the court, having just hit a more attackable trade. Slice sets up the drive. Height of contact, and positioning. On the point before, we got a short Musetti slice, one that was so short that Fritz had to come in. Taylor actually handled the approach shot pretty well, got a look at a high backhand volley, didn't put it away, and Musetti passed him on a backhand cross court. Big mischance for a mini break there. So I want to highlight those 2 points. That's how the tiebreak started. Big second serve is how the tiebreak ended. Musetti comes away with one set apiece. He relaxes a little bit from here and starts to play much better tennis. And that was a key point. Fritz, in terms of his performance alone, it was a subpar forehand performance that made it tough on him, especially having to play so many extra balls because of Musetti's defense, especially because one of the ways that he could combat the awkwardness of Musetti's backhand slice on a good forehand day was maybe to try to just run around a lot and to do serious damage with his forehand on the runaround. That's another disadvantage of the slice, that it gives a player more time to find their forehand. And in this case, Fritz just couldn't really find pay dirt with the forehand. He couldn't cash in on those forehand opportunities with enough frequency. And also Taylor never really sustained the serving groove that we had seen him get into throughout the rest of the tournament. So I think he felt the weight of the opportunity, the weight of the moment, and couldn't quite play his best. But I also think that Musetti and the things he does are wildly impressive and wildly problematic if you do not have the skill set to deal with it, which I do not think Taylor Fritz had. Great performance from Musetti. Just a lot of points that you watch it, and the artistry of it, the variety of it, the execution of it all is stunning to witness. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.